Hey, kids, and welcome. It is that time again. It's Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox coming at you today for Monday, February 6th. It's the week of February 6th through Sunday, February 12th. And we are officially a week into a kind of quiet month. We've got Mars is not quite up to his usual pace, but every week that passes, he's going to move a little bit faster and faster. In fact, at the very end of February, he still won't be at his usual pace, which is half a degree a day, but he'll be just slightly slower than that, right? So every week that we move through this month has us moving a little bit faster. So we've got Venus in the wonderful, lovely, yummy, exalted sign of Pisces. And Mercury finally passed his retrograde cycle. All three acts are done. We will talk mostly about Mercury today when we get to the astrology. But of course, as ever, I want to start with a question.
What do we got today?
Well, this is one of my favorite sort of esoteric topics in astrology. Lindsay writes in, she wants to know all about something that's called interceptions. An intercepted chart means that two of the signs in the chart in opposition, right? One polarity of signs that oppose each other is stuck inside the house that they appear in the birth chart, not actually ruling any house, but kind of squeezed inside of a house. So to describe what this means, I'm also going to have to describe what it is. So not unlike talking about the vertex last week, I'm going to invite you all to use your imagination, your mind's eye, to picture some things visually that I will do my best to describe with my voice. Don't close your eyes if you're driving. So when we know what time and what location a person is born in, we get to cast an exact, accurate chart in the Placidus house system, which says that when we do know the exact time and the exact latitude and longitude, that first breath that you take marks a moment both in the time of the day, but also the where on the planet that you took that first breath. So in that moment of your actual life beginning, that place and that time points to the eastern horizon of the Earth in the middle of her 24-hour-a-day spin that is fixed by that time. So I was born at 3:48 p.m. in Monticello, New York. So if you were standing in the afternoon in a hot summer's day when I took my first breath in 1963 and you looked at the eastern horizon, what would be coming up over the horizon would be 22 degrees of the constellation Sagittarius. So I am a Sagittarius rising. So knowing the rising sign establishes what we would call the first house in the 12th house zodiacal wheel that is your natal chart. Now, one of the reasons why this gets complicated for people is when you start thinking about, well, does the sign that is the rising sign, if I say at the eastern horizon when I took my first breath was 22 degrees of Sagittarius, does that mean that actual point in the constellation of Sagittarius was at the eastern horizon? And the answer, of course, is no, because
That's so minuscule.
well, here's where it gets complicated. Once you get this, you can't unget it, but it can take a little while to get, which is that at the astrological marker of the beginning of the year is the vernal equinox, the moment when the Earth and the sun are in alignment with the first day of spring. And that alignment, we call that 0 degrees of Aries. Is it? No, we've moved on from 0 degree of Aries being aligned with March 22nd or so by many, 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 many years. And in sidereal astrology, Vedic astrology, they follow the moon. That's why their the ecliptic is accurate because they are working with where the stars are placed. But in Western astrology, we don't really do that. The stars and the stories based on that the constellations are based on are the tales that give us the archetypes in question. And then you just got to, this is the salient things, kids. You just got to take the astrological year as something that starts at the vernal equinox. That's the beginning of the astrological new year. And so we call that the beginning of the countdown of the placement. We just call this date the starting point. So if the date is the starting point in our Julian calendar, then the ecliptic measurement says that at that moment when the Earth and the Sun are in such an alignment that days and nights are of equal length and we start spring in the Northern Hemisphere, we call that the beginning, 0 degrees of Aries, and that each 30 days has the sun moving an exact 30 degrees, and each subsequent sign is the distance of time it takes for the sun and the earth to move such that the position of the sun appears to go 30 degrees. Some of you are going to get that, kids, and some of you are not, and it's just if you're not mathematically and geometrically inclined, just don't worry about it. So for those who got it, you got it. That's great. So here we understand that when we then know the latitude and longitude and the birth time, that establishes a point in the ecliptic that we call the rising sign. And that says, here's your first house of your natal chart.
Mhm.
Typically, during the 24-hour spin of the day, 12 houses, 12 signs, and the even distribution is exact. You take a breath, you have a chart, you got 12 signs, 12 houses, each sign rules a house, boom, there's your natal chart. Have fun learning all about it.
Mm.
But in the spin of the day, of the 24-hour, spin that the Earth is doing, there are these like 15-minute swaths of time every couple of hours where the movement of the Earth at that moment during the day does not generate an even distribution of 12 houses and 12 signs. That if you take your first breath within that like 15-minute period, you're going to have a polarity in your chart not land on a house cusp to rule it, but to fall inside of a house and be squeezed in by it. And in such charts, we call that to be an intercepted chart. Now, I call this a soul's purpose choice, meaning if you took your first breath 10 minutes before or 10 minutes after this little 15-minute nugget of time, no interception. So if you have an interception in your chart, my first sort of woo-woo guidance about that was like, you chose this path because I believe we are in charge of our first breath, even when it's a scheduled, cesarean, that the soul that's coming in chooses when to take that first breath to dial up a certain kind of an experience. So what is the experience of an intercepted chart? First and foremost, if the intercepted signs in the chart don't contain any planets, then the interception is going to be so mild and not really worthy of one's attention because a planet in those signs amplifies what I'm about to describe more intensely. If you Google this, the thing you're going to find right away is language that says whatever energy is intercepted, that person is going to have less access to that energy than someone else, which is a ridiculous way of trying to perceive this. I'll say more about that in a minute, but I also want to add the other thing that you probably won't find too much if you just Google this, which is that intercepted energies open up at midlife. And for us, we call midlife around 42 because that's the half Uranus cycle, when Uranus which has a life cycle length orbit, 84 years, when we have Uranus oppose Uranus right at around 42, the idea is, in an intercepted chart, that there's going to be a greater midlife crisis than the average bear, possibly, and then the life is going to change dramatically, setting up a second act of life post 40-ish that's very, very different than the life that's pre 40-ish.
Are we talking like the stockbroker who has an awakening and is like,
Yes! Oh my
actually, I'm
God,
going to
that's like
open a smoothie shop?
that's the perfect way, right? Where the consciousness of the first 40 years goes into a very different direction. Here's one that I've seen a billion times over the years: women and their relationship to motherhood. I've seen dozens of cases where an intercepted chart for a woman might show early mothering and second half of the life career, or the other way around, devoted in one direction, and then in the late 30s, they become a mother, and then the whole second half of their life is different. One of the reasons why I love interceptions and talk about them so deeply is that I have an intercepted chart. My Aquarius Leo trajectory was intercepted, squeezed into the 2nd and 8th house. And these are big planets in my chart. Saturn in Aquarius, and over in Leo, it's my Sun and my Venus conjunction. So that's like my entire karmic life lesson and why I'm here and what I'm here to learn, and my sense of self and how I live in my heart.
Yeah, big ones.
So my last job in the corporate world in my late 30s was vice president of new business development for Playboy Enterprises. Yes, that Playboy. So that giggle was worth everything.
I mean, that's hilarious.
No, it's hilarious, and it's incongruous.
That is hilarious.
So, but here's the thing then. So the intercepted chart, in my case, definitely showed that there would be a very dramatic midlife crisis that would lead to a very different sense of identity in the second half of life, because my son was part of the interception, and that it would have to do with karmic contract stuff, Saturn. And in fact, by the time I moved through my interception and was in my early 40s, I was a professional spiritual teacher. And I just told you my last job title, very different than professional spiritual teacher. So I sometimes call the distinction between the intercepted energy before 40, I'll refer to it as cookie dough. Because it's yummy, it's a tasty snack, and, who wouldn't, if I just gave you cookie dough and said, here, taste this, do you like it? You'd be like, yum, can I have some more? But it's not the same as cookies. Cookies are the matured version, the more powerful, the one that requires a little combustion and chemical reactions. So the second half of life becomes cookies after a lifetime of cookie dough for the first 4 decades. So it is... if you have an interception in your chart, based on what your age is, if you're in the first 4 decades, then you have to understand that that interception means there's a certain kind of late bloomerish quality that might open up the second half of your life more powerfully in terms of just who you are and access to certain aspects of your consciousness, somewhat dramatically once we cross that threshold of 40. And I caution you, if you're under 40 and you read a little bit about this in the way that some people will, and it says things like, you won't have access to this part of your consciousness. Yes, I thought of myself a little bit as a late bloomer, but I didn't feel like I didn't have an active sense of self in the first 40 years. I did. It changed in the second 40.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't over-pathologize yourself if you discover as a result of listening to this that you have an interception in your chart. And if you're over 40, just glance back at that little period between 38 and 42 and wonder how you opened up, Mr. Stockbroker, who's now a spiritual guru. That's the power of an intercepted chart.
This makes me really interested in, these days people are hip to astrology and they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have like an Aries baby, Do people ever come to you and and ask you and talk about like, I'd really vibe with a Taurus baby. So can you give me some
Like
guidance on like
when
when to conceive? Are people doing that math?
people are. Let me be very clear. Yes, of course people are, but also understand this. Like I would never help somebody through such a thing simply because of the enormous amount of time it would take to just do the research. I mean, you have to be like digging and digging and digging and in to like, and I just don't. Who's got the resources at that time? But certainly astrology can assist in such a thing by planning, conceptions and birthing. And yes, I've seen it happen. As I've said, it's a quiet month, and it's probably the quietest week in the quietest month of the first half of the year. But there's certainly a lot to say about Mercury this week, because just as we get into this week, he's hitting 24 degrees of Capricorn tomorrow, Tuesday. That's where he started his retrograde. So that means that when he turned around 2.5 weeks ago, he was inching towards where he started, and he gets there tomorrow, which means we are officially done with the entire retrograde cycle, including this third act of what we call the direct shadow, that he's moving direct, but he's wrapping things up. Tomorrow's that final day, and the big news about that is, as of this week, Mercury moves into 2 months of what I like to refer to as his free and clear status, where there's no retrograde in sight. It's a wonderful couple of months to put stuff out into the world and trust that if you're setting things up that are, events or require invitations or people responding, communication will be smoother. There'll be less automatic and guaranteed delays. We love paying attention to Mercury in this regard, that we don't have to sort of, worry that something we're trying to accomplish will be, made more problematic by Mercury, turning around. Just as we finish the week up, there's an interesting couple of days as we move through, say, like Friday and Saturday, because that's when Mercury is going to meet up with Pluto, have a little Congress with the Lord of the Underworld, then go to the final degree of Mercury on Saturday. And then by the time Saturday is over, Mercury changes signs and moves into Aquarius. Very much putting the Mercury retrograde cycle behind us. One of the things that this is going to bring about for us as we move towards the weekend is awareness and downloads of information that come from deep places in our psyche. Pluto is the lord of the underworld, and we can think of him as having that big room down there in the basement where we just shove everything that we aren't ready to look at or things from the past that we have not yet looked at. So anytime a personal planet, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, makes any direct contact with Pluto, whether it's like now by conjunction or even just an exact angle with Pluto, something having to do with shadow work and looking at things that are typically outside of our conscious awareness viewpoint are up. That's what's up. And when it's Mercury and Pluto, this is very much about becoming aware of stuff that's in the below and being able to talk about it, to identify unconscious patterns, right? So like if we think of Mercury as your guidance, navigation, and perception mechanism, and we know that Mercury's just gone retrograde and taken us for a little visit into our unconscious, then we come out of that cycle, which we do at the beginning of this week. We come out of Mercury's retrograde cycle having actually shifted things on an unconscious level. So then we just have to wait for Mercury to keep moving to sort of see what new awarenesses are possible because of a journey that we've just been through. So that as we finish out this week and we sort of move through a Thursday and Friday as this is peaking, now we have our awareness, our perceptions, and the planet that drives our conversations dipping into the underbelly of the shadow material that Pluto brings. You can expect deep and passionate conversations. You can absolutely expect connecting with people to create and generate change. And if you've been in any kind of a narrative, which many people have been, that is sort of personally healing, there may be some awareness of what your needs are. We're going to be able to speak more powerfully after Friday's meetup of Pluto and Mercury. We're going to be able to speak more directly and passionately and authentically into what some of our needs are from deeper places in our awareness, courage that we've been cultivating by looking at some of these underbelly and unconscious places over the last few months. I just love Mercury coming together with Pluto as we finish this week, and then he takes whatever power that conjunction brings, ushers into a new mansion as he moves into Aquarius on Saturday. So Mercury spends about 2.5 weeks in any given sign. So he's going to spend 2.5 weeks in Aquarius starting this coming weekend. This is a wonderful sign for Mercury in terms of our intuition. Well, Aquarius invented intuition. So Mercury in Aquarius is like the height of seeing things that are seeable, but only if you can sort of synthesize all the information in the room. That's really the definition of intuition. And intuition is not psychic. Psychic, as a kind of a mystical notion, that's a domain of Scorpio. Being able to see beyond the veils and have wisdom about stuff that's from beyond the veils of awareness, that's a Scorpio consciousness. That's where shamanism and psychic abilities sort of dwell. What intuition is includes psychic phenomenon, but also all of the other information in the room. The intuitive person just walks into a space, looks around, and sees how all of the different information that's being presented can be integrated and constellated, and therefore assessments made because you've put some things together. Mercury in Aquarius has this capacity in spades to look around the space and feel the changes and automatically know how this impacts that, how this moving part will include shifts that have to happen over here. We are innovative. We are out of the box in our thinking. We're much more risk-taking in what we will express. Our voices become a little bit more entrepreneurial and powerful with Mercury in the sign that doesn't hold back from being unique and unusual and putting your own sort of stamp on things. It's a powerful and wonderful placement for Mercury starting this weekend. So the last thing I want to just sort of bring up about the week is kind of general. It's something that the moon is sort of doing by hitting a couple of planets in the beginning of the week and then the end of the week in what's called the Great Eliminator angle. This creates loosely what's called a finger of God or finger of fate, which just means that while it's a slow week in terms of active traffic in the planets, like we're not going to be in great craziness because the astrology is amplified. In fact, the opposite is true. It's a little quieter and a little slower, and it becomes almost more important this week that you pay attention to the little forks in the road, the tiny choices that might not seem outrageously important, but could be in the long realm. Long realm? Long range.
Long run.
Long run, thank you. So, the long run. So, The inconjunct, the 150-degree angle that implies a fork in the road or the road less traveled by revealing itself. In the very beginning of the week, while the moon is in Virgo, she's going to hit Jupiter, Chiron, and Neptune in this eliminator angle. So that means through Jupiter, we're making new choices to go in the direction of where the bounty is, where the cash and prizes are. An inconjunct with Chiron says we move in new ways because we've healed some wounds and we're not coming from our wounded spaces. So we can make a new choice. And the same angle to Neptune allows us to be guided by spirit to comfortably try the new little niggling possibility that the road might show you in these first couple of days of the week. Then towards the end of the week, when the moon moves into Scorpio, she's moved 60 degrees, which means she's going to do the same inconjuncts to Neptune, Chiron, and Jupiter in opposite order. So again, beginning of the week and the end of the week, we have this support from our unconscious, because the moon and her movements reflect our unconscious impulses sort of speaking to us. And the beginning of the week, she's hinting at us, make new choices, try that fork in the road. And at the end of the week, she's doing the same thing. So in a quiet week, when the planets are not interfering with our flow as much with great geometries that we absolutely have to sort of grapple with, it is an important week to be mindful of, especially now that the planets are starting to move again, and therefore, so are we. You don't want to just make impulsive choices this week. Take a day to sleep on things if a decision seems even a little bit important. And then look for always the road less traveled by this week, and try that direction, because we're being asked to operate in a new way now that Mars and Mercury have sort of changed how we want to embody our lives and how we guide it through intuition and mental guidance. We're in new consciousness. We get to move powerfully in new ways, but we want to do that a little bit slowly and mindfully this week, so that we can be supported by what the solar system is doing and actually helping us change the direction we're moving in small incremental ways as this week unfolds. Have at it.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. I have my own dream question before we get into an emailed dream this week.
I love that. Yay.
So this
lay it on
morning,
me.
I popped out of the house to take my foster dog somewhere and came back, fell back asleep, and I had two dreams involving me at parties where I felt like a little frustrated and confused. And I know that like every setting, like a house or an apartment, hotel, whatever, those all have a meaning. And so what does a party setting mean?
This is what I love about this question is that this also gets me to sort of present to you and therefore the listening audience that dreams work on different layers at the same time. And so that when I'm working with a dreamer, whether it's here on the pod in a kind of limited public way or in session when it's more intimate, I'm working with what I refer to as the inner circle of interpretation, which is a Jungian approach where every aspect of the dream is a reflection of the dreamer. Every person is an aspect of that dreamer's character. Bigger people like celebrities or larger than life figures are their archetypal or aspirational nature. And then the settings are reflecting the dreamer's consciousness. But there is the, what I call the outer circle, where dreams absolutely are responding to our waking life experiences and might be reflecting something back to us that isn't about our psyche, but our movement through the world. So let's look at this symbol from both perspectives. From the outer circle of interpretation, a party is a symbol of social connection, of what it is to be outside of yourself and interacting with other people at a social level is quite literally happening in a party. And so the symbolism in a dream would be the same, that this is a consideration of ways that you sometimes feel when moving about in the world in a social way at the time you have the dream. But if you go strictly to the inner circle, I would put this out, that every person in a body in your dream is like an embodied thought that you are having, or a thought form. And so a party is an arena in which there are many, many different thought forms present, none of which you're actually going to be engaging with deeply, but all of which together create a cacophony of social interaction that causes stress. Now just take that same image, though, and instead of thinking I'm at a party with people, it's like I'm in my thoughts. It's like a gathering of many, many, many thoughts. And in all of those thoughts, which we might translate as overthinking or anxious thinking, I am made uncomfortable because there are just too many disparate thoughts rising up at this time. And that, like an emotional quality that could be well reflected by the image of a party in a dream where you feel a little uncomfortable.
Well, I do have anxiety, so I think that lines up. Interesting. Okay, thank you. All right, shall we hop into this dream?
Yes, let's.
Our email in dream for this week is from Janet, and this is a theme that we've talked about before, but we haven't talked about in quite a long time. So this dream is from Janet, and she has a reoccurring dream about not being able to find her car in a parking lot. And usually it's at a high school parking lot, but this one was a bit different. So she's in an apartment that she knows is hers. And she says, in walks my second husband, who I was married to a year, divorced, and he passed away in 2017. I'm surprised he could get into my apartment, but I didn't seem surprised that he's alive in the dream. Apparently, he had my keys. I'm not happy he's there and could get in, and he says he was driving my car and parked it down the street. Also, not happy about that. I go outside to find my car because I know he parked it in the wrong area. It's not there, and I know someone has taken it. I use my beeper to see if it's nearby. It is, but in the back area of an auto garage where people are working. I'm distressed and don't know how I'll get my car from them, but trying to think of ways that I can do that. I think I go into the garage, but I haven't figured a way to get the car, and then I wake up.
Well, this is interesting that we have this little distinction in this dream of it including her second husband, if this is a kind of a theme. So let's talk about the recurring theme of I can't find my car, or the car is stuck in a parking lot, or some recurring imagery where car features, but car is not moving.
Which is, in my unexpert dream interpreter opinion, that is her unable to move forward about something. Bam.
That is correct. Now, it's a theme that recurs, right? So then we have to make sure that, Janet, we understand that this is a way that your brain knows when you're feeling some sort of way, the brain will say, okay, Janet's in that stuck place again. How can we help reflect that stress? Okay, we'll throw up this dream of like not finding her car, it being stuck in a parking lot, and it's, this is issues that she became aware of in her adolescence. So let's make it high school. So on a certain level, Janet, you will always have this dream when you're feeling a little bit stuck in a general way that just might mean like, oh, once again, you're feeling stuck. And so this is a dream that very well describes that sensation. Your brain is economical and will say, I'm feeling this way. Here's a dream that matches. And you have that recurring dream yet again. So for the rest of your life, every time you have this dream, just look around your life and say, what feels stuck? What area of my life isn't moving? Maybe this dream is about
Side
that.
note, Michael, I think a good dating profile question and or first date question, what's the reoccurring dream in your life?
Oh my
Get
God,
into it.
yes. Get into it. I love that. So this dream is a little bit different. First of all, we're in some consciousness that she is not quite familiar with. Janet says she's in her apartment. She knows it's hers. So she made emphasis of, I know this is mine. So because it's not her home, she didn't say, I'm in my apartment. She said, I'm in an apartment I know is mine. And for me, the listener, that's different. I'm in my apartment is, oh, okay, she's having a dream that's in consideration of herself. But I'm in an apartment that I know is mine, then we have to add a little bit of a layer. It's not something she recognizes as hers. The knowing is deeper. It's more internal. I know this is mine. So this means the dream is showing some aspect of self to Janet that she's not quite aware of, but that is very much a part of who she is and is asking for a little, exploration and integration. Hence, she wrote you an email. So if this is a husband, so this second husband walks in, who's clearly not present anymore. The marriage only lasted a year. And I'm assuming from the way she wrote the email was that when he passed in 17, that they were already divorced. That's certainly what it sounded like. But because he's in this dream, there's an opportunity at the moment that this dream happened, right? This is important, Janet. So if this dream just happened recently and that's what got you to send it into us, then it's a now thing. But if you had this a year ago or a bunch ago, you're going to have to look back to that time frame because that time frame was reflecting a level of your stuckness that has something to do with who you were in that marriage. Because there he is, right? And he's got the keys, which means that's the consciousness of, I can't get my car. Like he's taken it and put it somewhere else. That it winds up, it's being worked on. So that's important too. This dream says, my movement through life is stopped. The clue that I'm going to get, I being Janet, the clue about what quality of myself might be getting in my own way could have to do with what did I learn in that marriage with my second husband? Who was I being then? How was I stuck back then? How did leaving that marriage open me up to unsticking myself such that he's showing up now? There's got to be a connection because there he is, and it's worthy of your consideration. So the implication of the car being in the garage, to me, suggests it's already being worked on. So then this isn't a dream of, uh-oh, I have a crisis. What do I do about it? This is more of a dream for Janet to be like, okay, I'm in that regularly occurring crisis of feeling stuck, but I'm not stuck. In fact, something's happening that's being worked on to get me unstuck. But the psyche is giving me this dream, probably saying, hey, Janet, the thing you're looking for that will give you a clue as to how you're stuck now that you want to get unstuck might connect to ways in which you felt stuck in that marriage or ways that that marriage held you back. But there's absolutely worthiness in looking back at who you were in regard to that man who shows up in your dream so that you can get back into your car and driving forward, enjoying life, moving at its own yummy, fast-paced clip.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.